So it appears that the first part of speculation season has concluded, and for a lot of media outlets it might not have ended the way they anticipated, given that they must have had about 997 articles about this guy leaving one team, and then the guy who deserves the seat moving in to replace him, like the proverbial hermit crab. Although it might have screwed up a couple of other drivers' plans as well. Sergio Perez is staying at Red Bull, ending about 3 months of will he won't he at the team, and his results seem to have dropped off the face of the planet this year. And if you're driving for the top team on the grid and that team wants to win the Constructors' Championship, the results being put in by the Mexican aren't exactly what they're going to be wanting. At the rate things are going, McLaren could potentially overhaul Red Bull at the end of the season. The speculation surrounding Perez has come despite him recently signing an extension to his contract, which takes him to the end of 2026. You'd think there'd be some sort of performance-related clause in there that allows Red Bull to release him early, but at the same time, you'd also think about how you release someone from a contract that, in theory, hasn't even started yet. But then again, I'm not one of Red Bull's lawyers, and you or I are never going to see more than the headlines of the contract, for want of a better term. And the decision to keep Perez comes just 55 days after he's signed that contract extension. The change in Perez's fortunes this season compared to last season are stark. Perez was second in the championship last year, in a year where Red Bull had by far the best car on the grid, and it won all but one race. But despite being in the fastest car by a country mile, Perez finished second to Max just 4 times. There's a total of 10 occasions where he was off the podium. This year, though, it's been a rough ride. Perez hasn't stood on the podium since the race in China, at a time when Red Bull still had the best car on the grid. But since then, there has been the fallout surrounding Adrian Newey abruptly leaving the team, the rumoured power struggle within the operation in Milton Keynes, and other bits and pieces that seem to be unsettling the atmosphere at the Red Bull factory, with upgrades to the RB20 seeming to reduce the drivability of the car rather than improve its performance. First was the upgrades brought to Monaco, where Perez shunted into a wall and the floor was shown to the world, with screenshots, drawings and analysis probably being done at every factory on the grid, as they all wanted to get a good look at what Red Bull had done to create the rocket ship they had. But the upgrades at Monaco weren't exactly great, with Max saying that the car now felt like a go-kart, which has in turn led Red Bull to believe that not only are they hitting the point where they have diminishing returns given how good the car was last year, while at the same time thinking that it might be an issue they've brought in themselves. The Toro Rossos, not their name I know but it's habit, are using last year's Red Bull suspension and haven't had the same issues over bumps and curbs that the Red Bull seems to be having now. As it was, CHECO was eliminated in the first qualifying session, and then on lap 1 of the race was wiped out in an accident that wasn't even his fault. But still, had he qualified a bit better, he would have avoided all of that entirely. Which seems a shame, because going to Red Bull in the first place was kind of a second chance at a top team for the Mexican. He started his career at Sauber in 2011, and in 2012, while driving for the Swiss team, he was within a shot of winning the Malaysian Grand Prix, catching up to within half a second of Alonso, who would go on to win that race, but CHECO made a mistake on the final lap which dropped him back. He would also pick up 2 more podiums that year, a third in Canada and another second at Monza, with a smattering of points elsewhere to finish 10th overall on 66 points. This caught the attention of McLaren, who signed him up to replace Hamilton as he departed for Mercedes. But his time at McLaren wasn't exactly great. Flaws in the car, along with some overly aggressive driving behaviour that drew criticism from his own teammate at the team and also from Raikkonen, who suggested that Perez be punched in the face. All this led to McLaren dropping him after 1 season, and Perez was off to Force India, where he scored a lot of decent, consistent points. It was just bizarre. Put him in a mid-tier car and he performs incredibly well, but his time at one of the top teams on the grid was an utterly baffling experience. All his points hauls during his time at the former Jordan operation were all more than what he achieved at McLaren. So after his heroics through 2019 and 2020, this attracted the attention of Red Bull, who offered him another chance at a top team. He was a respectable 4th in the standings in 2021, 3rd in 2022 and 2nd last year, showing an upward trend the longer he was at the team. But this year, while he started off okay, he's now dropped off the face of the cliff entirely. Not only did Red Bull bring upgrades to Monaco, they also brought some to Silverstone and again to Hungary. While Max has found ways of driving around the problems creeping into the car over the last few months, CHECO doesn't seem to have that ability, and it's costing him more and more and more as the season goes on. It's costing him so much that he's struggling to outqualify a teammate. I say a teammate because we all know that Max is the superior driver of the two, but it makes it worse when he's struggling to outqualify Albon's teammate. At Silverstone, he qualified 19th after spinning off in the damp qualifying session and then finished 17th, 2 laps down on race winner Hamilton. Although, during that race, Perez had been used as the sacrificial lamb for the tyre switching. Either way, Horner called his performance there unsustainable. And it is. And the most die-hard of CHECO apologists high on weapons-grade copium will struggle to defend his recent performances. Since his contract extension was announced, Perez has qualified an average of 14th, and then finished an average of 13th, and has only scored 24 points. Verstappen has scored over 100 points despite not winning in 4 race weekends. Perez scored 0 in Monaco when he was taken out, he scored 0 in Canada when he wiped himself out, he scored 4 in Spain, 7 in Austria, none at Silverstone, 6 in Hungary, and then 7 at Belgium, which would have been fewer points, but he was helped by Russell's disqualification. And while on the subject of the Belgian Grand Prix, the way Horner spoke to the media might have given some sort of indication as to where things were going to be shifting as they went into the summer break. Despite being second on the grid, although helped by Max's 10th-place grid penalty, Motorsport magazine had noted that pretty much the only thing Christian Horner had talked about was how Max was going to move up the field, and he had virtually zero optimism for CHECO being able to keep it in between Charles and Lewis. As it was, Lewis beat CHECO on the run down the hill to Eau Rouge, and despite a bit of a fight back, CHECO only went backwards, 2nd to 8th, but then moved up to 7th with Russell's disqualification. It probably didn't help matters that Liam Lawson was given a run out at a filming day recently, which might have set the rumour mill into overdrive, but that thing had been planned for months, and it wasn't the they're moving Ricciardo to Red Bull and Lawson up to Toro Rosso thing that some might have hoped. Which then begs the question, would dumping Perez now and replacing him with someone else be an upgrade? Ricciardo has started to show form and is now getting one up over Tsunoda, but that's still no guarantee that he would slot into that Red Bull seat and be where he was in 2017. He might, but it seems that Red Bull doesn't want to take the gamble, which seems odd considering how chop and change heavy they have been in the past. There is actually an unconfirmed rumour. I say rumour, it's most likely total BS, that Liberty Media actually asked Red Bull to keep Perez because of how valuable he is to the Central and South American market. I'm just going to leave you with that one, since it's only come from one source and none of the trusted sources are talking about it, so we could probably lob that one in the bin. So Red Bull prioritising the commercial rights holder's ability to make money in Central and South America over winning the World Constructors' Championship. That's going to be a heavy pressing X to doubt on that one. I'm actually struggling here to see how any F1 team would willingly go along with that. Answers on a postcard. I mean, if you have any answers. Or postcards. I mean, do people still buy postcards? But then again, this is the same outlet that said that Horner and Marco had supposedly told the Verstappens that CHECO was being dumped for the rest of the season, and Max would have a new teammate for his second home race of the season at Zandvoort. I only know that because somebody has already screen capped it and stuck it on an internet. So moving on to the other story that's broken in the last couple of days, it's probably why Carlos Sainz has signed for Williams rather than waiting around for the Red Bull seat. If Red Bull are being, as many in the comment sections of these articles are saying, indecisive with Perez, with Mercedes looking at Antonelli, Ferrari out of the question because Hamilton is inbound and McLaren locked in with Piastri and Norris, oh and what's happening with Audi too, it seems like a good idea for Sainz. Seems. Because let's face it, if Sainz is going to Williams and is thinking, I'm going to get a podium, he's deluded. Williams is in the midst of the biggest rebuilding effort of any team in Formula 1 history, probably, as they are in the middle of a modernisation program that should have been started 20 years ago. But the vision Williams has is solid. The plans they've got in place are organised, and 2 experienced drivers in the car should bring the team more consistent results. Albon's been knocking on the door of points a few times over the course of the season. He's not quite getting them. I mean, he has got a couple of points, but it just needs that extra push over the line to consistently score points. I mean, yes, he's had some howlers, but Carlos instead of Logan seems a no-brainer in this case. But at the same time, how the hell did Williams beat Mercedes, Aston Martin, Red Bull, Audi, Alpine to Sainz's signature? It's actually fairly simple when you look at the bigger picture. Alpine is a complete shower. They've just canned the engine operation and will be getting customer engines soon. Anything that's happening over there will be a short gain if Sainz is lucky, and that the team might make a bit of a gain but slip back sooner rather than later. The The only way they're going is backwards unless they hook onto some sort of miracle for 2026. At the same time, most of the guys at Audi who are well up for coming into Formula 1 have pretty much all been replaced by people that never wanted Audi in the sport to start with. And if you've watched my video on the whole BMW Williams stuff, we're very much looking at the same thing that happened there. It's actually quite scary, the parallels between the two. Sauber, in the interim, is not going to be a fun place to be next year. Anyone that signs up is going to have to suffer with a terrible car and will just be a holding pattern for Audi, which will probably not be the magic bullet for Sauber's performance. They'll be mid-grid at best, and with the backroom strife that's going on, then what's the point? The payday will be good, but will Sainz enjoy racing there? Mercedes would have been a good place to go, but they seem fixated on Antonelli or getting Verstappen for next year. Red Bull could have had an open seat for next year, but as this video has already discussed, they're on for keeping Perez, and even then there's no guarantee Perez will be around come the end of the season. If it gets to, say, I don't know, Brazil, and they go, sorry CHECO, we need someone that's not going to wall the car every qualifying, and then they put somebody else in that's not Sainz, then Sainz is out of F1 for 2025 because he's waited too long before getting something confirmed. Then you've got Aston Martin, which has Alonso in already, and there's no way the boss's kid is being binned. Williams, by some absolutely mammoth way of all the stars aligning, is actually the most stable option. Williams is a more stable option for Carlos Sainz than Mercedes, Red Bull, Alpine, or Aston Martin. Williams, meanwhile, must be licking their lips at the prospect. Not only have they got two popular drivers who both ironically came through the Red Bull system, they've also got a driver that commercially is a good call too. Not sure what he brings in terms of outright sponsorship already, but with him there might be the prospect of attracting more sponsorship from Spain. And one more thing that's been pointed out thanks to people that know a lot more about Formula 1 than I do, is that for the first time in forever, Williams has got two solid drivers. In 2016, it was Bottas and Massa. Okay, Massa wasn't the same since his accident in 2009, but he was a safe pair of hands, and Valtteri was scoring consistent results and getting the team's only podium of 2016. At the end of the season, well, just before the start of 2017, Valtteri moved to Mercedes, and Massa had to come out of retirement as they brought in Lance Stroll to take the seat vacated by Bottas, and Stroll was beaten soundly by Massa. Okay, that's an exaggeration of the highest magnitude. Massa only beat Stroll by 3 points. Should have probably checked that before I wrote this. After that, it's been a bit of a struggle. 2018, Stroll and Sirotkin. 2019, Kubica came back in and was partnered with Russell, and after a time away plus his hand injury, he wasn't able to show what he was capable of prior to that. In 2020, Latifi came in and was destroyed by Russell. 2021, the same thing, and in 2022, Russell was replaced by Albon, with Latifi being replaced for 2023. So for the first time in 9 years, will Williams have two drivers who are capable and not having to rely on one good driver and one that brings a boatload of cash with them? But what would have made more sense is for Mercedes to farm Antonelli out to Williams and get Sainz instead. Williams has had a massive boost, but Mercedes and Red Bull have lost themselves a great opportunity. I guess Carlos got bored of waiting. It also means that Albon finally has a yardstick with which to measure himself against, instead of being compared to Sargent or Latifi. And I'm just going to put this extra little bit here because by saying that they've got two solid drivers doesn't mean I think it's going to be 1996 all over again. This lineup isn't exactly Mansell and Piquet or Hill and Villeneuve. I mean, come to think of it, outside of Mansell and Piquet, has Williams ever had a world-class driver pairing? The Frentzen thing didn't go as well as they planned, Zanardi flopped hard in 1999, Montoya was rapid but binned it too often to get the most out of it. Put simply, Williams has had a good or great driver and an average number two more often than not. Whatever James Vowles is running and dreaming up at Grove, it must have offered enough for Sainz to want to commit to it, at least for the short term, because he might use it as a stopgap, you never know. The race noted that Vowles had shifted from "we're not talking about any potential drivers" to "we're thinking of Carlos" at some point in the last month. And when that was said, you'd have called him crazy, given that Audi was the place everybody thought Sainz was going to go, given his dad's connections over there. Sainz could have very easily been the face of Audi's entry into Formula 1, or been the guy that filled the very large gap left by Hamilton at Mercedes, to join Williams. Yes, I know I've said this several times by now, but I'm trying to get you to understand how much of a big deal this actually is. Although that said, Williams has taken steps to show that it is indeed serious about making its way forward on the grid. Pat Fry is now the Chief Technical Officer, Albon has been convinced to stay, and the amount of staff that's been added to the team in the last year and a half or so has increased by, well, a lot. Apparently it's over 1,000 people now. By doing that, it seems stable enough. Dorilton, who took over the team a few years ago, 2020 I think it was, have been putting money into the team. They've shown they're serious and they're not just using it as a thing with which to flip, if that makes any sense. If loads of people were jumping ship to other teams or to other categories and Dorilton wasn't putting in any money, then that would have been a turn-off for Sainz. But instead, the operation is growing, the owners are serious, the changes are being made, the turnaround is slow, but it's happening. Mercedes seems to really be gambling on Antonelli being the next big thing, despite not being anywhere near the top of the F2 standings. But as one commenter said, how many drivers have come up from Formula 2 or GP2 to be a front-running driver within 3 years? Hamilton, Leclerc, Piastri, Russell to an extent? The list is actually quite short. But at the same time, it comes to something when Williams is considered the least worst option, and I'm saying that as a Williams fan. But either way, silly season seems to be going on for the whole season. It's gone on way longer than anybody anticipated. At least this time, we can really say it's Hamilton's fault. So then, a look at the chaos going on at the minute with regards to CHECO keeping his seat and Sainz moving to Williams, of all places. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so I know a good job was done, and for more things from this channel, click the subscribe button thing and ring the bell thing so you never miss out on anything that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the rad lads at Patreon that continue to support me at a more personal level, and if you want to help keep things running around here, a link to Patreon will be in the description, along with links to Discord, socials and other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. There's also affiliate links where I get a kickback on anything you buy, and super thanks for the one and done donations, so, you know, like get me a coffee or something. Or memberships. There's also memberships for those that don't want to do Patreon but still support. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.